My name is Nola. I am 54 years old, and I am telling you this story from my quiet sunroom where the morning light filters through the old wisteria vine outside. Today is supposed to be a day of celebration, a day permanently etched in a family's history. But sometimes history takes a sharp, unexpected turn. You see, just yesterday I attended my only daughter's wedding. Sophie, my bright, beautiful Sophie, with her father's curious eyes and her own fierce heart, was marrying a man named David in a ceremony that felt like something out of a magazine spread. I wore a new dress the color of a pale morning sky, and I felt a flutter of nerves that had nothing to do with the ceremony, and everything to do with the subtle, lingering chill I always felt from the groom's family. The reception was at the Whitlock Estate on Lake Meridian, a place of sweeping lawns and money so old it whispered rather than shouted. I remember standing there, a simple woman in a simple dress, watching my daughter glow, thinking this was the happy ending to all my years of struggle. The cake was being presented a monumental confection of white frosting and sugar flowers. David, handsome and beaming, took the microphone and called me forward for what he called a fun family tradition. My heart, so full of hope and maternal pride, swelled. This was my moment to be welcomed in. I walked toward him, toward my daughter, toward what I believed was the beginning of a new blended family joy. Before I share what happened in that next breath, the moment the world I knew tilted on its axis, I want to truly connect with you. Where are you right now listening to my story? If you have ever walked into a room and felt the quiet weight of not belonging, if you have ever smiled while your heart was sinking, then you understand a piece of this. Let me know you're here by leaving a like and subscribe so we can walk through this memory together, step by step. The roots of that moment at the cake table didn't start yesterday. They were planted months ago during a tense dinner at my modest garden court apartment. Sophie brought David to meet me. He arrived with an extravagant bouquet of orchids and a handshake that felt more like an assessment. He was polished from his crisp shirt cuffs to his easy, confident laugh. Over my pot roast, a recipe from my own mother, he asked polite questions. So Nola, Sophie tells me you're quite the dedicated public servant. The way he said public servant made it sound quaint, like I collected antique spoons. I'm the archive manager at the Lowell Public Library, I said, trying to inject the pride I genuinely felt. We're currently digitizing the local newspaper collection from the 1920s. It's fascinating work. Digitizing, he repeated, nodding slowly. That's very forward-thinking of a municipal library. Must be a small team. Just me and 2 part-time assistants, I admitted. But we manage. He smiled a thin, lipless stretch. Admirable, really. It's wonderful to meet people so content with a life of quiet service. The air in my cozy dining room grew thick. Later, as I washed dishes, I heard their murmured conversation in the living room. She's sweet, David. She's just not what you're used to, Sophie whispered, a defensive edge in her voice. Darling, it's fine, he replied, his tone smooth and dismissive. It's charming, rustic even. We'll just have to make sure she's comfortable at the club events. Maybe we can take her shopping. That was the beginning of the great quiet shift in my daughter. The Sophie who once cherished the detailed scrapbooks I made for every school year now gently asked for store-bought ones. They're just more uniform, Mom, she'd say. The Sophie who loved my handmade quilts began using them as picnic blankets, buying sleek designer bedding for her apartment. When we went to look at mother-of-the-bride dresses, she guided me past the elegant, understated suits I was drawn to, and toward beaded gowns with dramatic trains. David's mother, Eleanor, is wearing a custom St. John's suit, she confided, her voice low. I just want you to feel appropriate. The unspoken word, worthy, hung between us. The engagement party at the Whitlock's Country Club was a masterclass in subtle degradation. I wore my best lilac suit. David's father, Lawrence, a man with a voice like gravel and a watch that cost more than my car, clapped me on the shoulder. Nola, good to see you clean up so well. He laughed, a booming sound that demanded others join in. His wife Eleanor, with her perfectly styled silver hair, gave me a smile that didn't warm her cool blue eyes. The Garden Court apartments, she mused. I believe they were built in the 60s. How durable. That night, I watched my daughter navigate this new world. She laughed at the right moments, discussed wine vintages, and seamlessly absorbed their vernacular. She was a chameleon blending into a foliage I found foreign and cold. The bridge between us, built on years of shared casseroles and bedtime stories, felt like it was made of mist, dissolving in the face of this new solid gold reality. In a desperate, foolish attempt to fortify it, I took the one thing of tangible value I had, my mother's exquisite amethyst pendant, the only nice thing she ever owned, to a jeweler, and sold it. The money bought the pale blue designer sheath I wore to the wedding. A sacrificial offering on the altar of social acceptance. The wedding day was a spectacle of coordinated perfection. My new dress itched at the nape of my neck. The Whitlock estate buzzed with hired efficiency valets in white gloves, a string quartet playing Vivaldi waiters, offering delicate canapés that disappeared in one bite. I felt like an imposter, a piece of plain muslin accidentally sewn into a tapestry of silk and gold thread. During the cocktail hour, as I tried to find a corner where I wouldn't be in the way, Eleanor Whitlock glided over. Her perfume was a cloud of cold jasmine. Nola, there you are. Her fingers, cool and dry, descended on the silk shawl I'd brought, a favorite I'd owned for years. She adjusted it, her touch firm, rearranging me. This is lovely, dear. But it was sitting a bit, sadly. There, much better. Her smile was a practiced curve. It was not kindness, it was correction. Near the bar, a cluster of David's friends, young men with surnames for first names, and the relaxed arrogance of inherited wealth glanced in my direction. One of them said something low, and they all chuckled, their eyes skimming over me before moving on. I was not a person to them. I was a curiosity, a minor character in the drama of David's life. Then came the speeches under the vast flower-draped pergola. David held the microphone like a talk show host. He praised his parents for their unwavering example of excellence and generosity. He thanked his band of brothers for their loyalty. Then he turned to Sophie, his voice dropping into a saccharine, possessive tone. And to my beautiful Sophie, you are a miracle. To have built such a remarkable life from such modest beginnings. You inspire me. He kissed her, and the crowd erupted in applause. He did not say my name. He did not thank the woman who worked double shifts to pay for ballet lessons, who stayed up until dawn, helping with science projects, who built the very remarkable life he now claimed to admire. I was erased, reduced to the anonymous backdrop of modest beginnings. The heat of shame and anger rose in my chest, so acute I thought I might be sick. I found my lifeline, my friend Miranda, near the French doors leading to the garden. She'd been my college roommate, a sharp-eyed professor of art history who saw through pretense like glass. She took one look at my face and clasped my hand. Her grip was solid, real. Breathe, Nola, just breathe. You're in the home stretch. Cake, then escape. We'll go get a disgusting cheeseburger and laugh about all this. She saw the tears I was stubbornly blinking back. I know it hurts, but today is her day. Swallow this bitter pill for her, for the Sophie you know is still in there. I nodded the lump in my throat, making it impossible to speak. The band leader announced the cake cutting. The massive 5-tiered creation was wheeled to the center of the dance floor, a sugary palace. David, his grin wide and theatrical, waved me over. Nola. Come on up here. Time for the good luck tradition. The crowd parted. I walked towards him, my heels sinking into the soft grass, each step feeling heavier than the last. My smile was a fragile mask. I tried to lock eyes with Sophie, to share a moment of us. But she was gazing up at David, her expression one of rapturous love. As I reached them, David's arm came around my shoulders. His grip was not affectionate. It was firm, controlling, like he was handling a prop. He leaned into the microphone. Folks in the Whitlock family, we believe you can't have a sweet future without getting a little messy first. Polite, expectant laughter rippled through the guests. I forced a laugh, thinking we would jointly make the first cut. I looked at the flawless white icing, the delicate sugar roses, and then I glanced at David's face. For one terrifying, crystal-clear second, the charming veneer vanished. What I saw in his eyes was not mischief, but a glint of pure, unadulterated contempt. It was the look you give an insect before you step on it. Then it was gone, replaced by his dazzling public smile. But I had seen it. The trapdoor had opened beneath my feet, and I was already falling. The violence of it was so casual, so shockingly swift. David's hand on my shoulder didn't guide. It shoved with a forceful downward thrust. At the same moment, his other hand, the one holding the microphone, came up and pressed hard against the back of my head. There was no time to resist, no time to even understand. My face plunged forward into the cold, yielding softness of the wedding cake's top tier. The world exploded into a cacophony of sound and sensation. The thud of impact was muffled internal. I heard the collective sharp intake of breath from the crowd, followed immediately by a loud guffawing laugh from one of David's friends. That single laugh acted as a permission slip, and suddenly the room was filled with laughter. Nervous, cruel, roaring laughter. I was bent at the waist, my nose and mouth clogged with thick buttercream and crumbled vanilla sponge. I couldn't breathe. Panic, raw, and animalistic shot through me. I pushed back against the table, stumbling upright, gasping for air. As I straightened, the scene before me swam into view through a sticky white haze. My vision was blurred with frosting. My carefully styled hair was a matted, sugary mess. My beautiful sacrificed blue dress was a canvas of rainbow-colored smears and stains. And there in the center of it all stood David. He was still holding the microphone, his face alight with a triumphant, vicious joy. He pointed the silver cake server at me, as if presenting a spectacle. "Would you look at this, everyone?" He bellowed, his voice amplified and echoing in the high-ceilinged tent. The laughter swelled in response. "My future mother-in-law. She looks like a street beggar who just hit the jackpot at a bakery." More howls of laughter. He paused, letting the humiliation sink in, savoring it. "I guess that's the first taste of the good life you've ever had." "Huh, Nola? Hope you savored it." The words were physical blows. The heat of 1,000 eyes upon me, the sound of derision from 200 throats, it created a humiliation so total it felt like being skinned alive. My body trembled. Instinctively, my burning, sugar-stung eyes searched the crowd for my daughter. I found her. Sophie stood frozen a few feet away, her bouquet dangling forgotten from her hand. Her face was a mask of shock, painted crimson from her hairline to the neckline of her gown. But her eyes were not fixed on David in furious disbelief. They were locked on me. And in them, I saw horror. Yes, but worse, a profound, crippling embarrassment. A shame for me. And then, as our gazes met, she did the thing that broke me. She looked away. Her chin dipped, her eyes dropping to the grass, as if the sight of me, her mother, was too painful to bear. That was the annihilation. The laughter was a torment, but it was external. This, my child's averted gaze, her silent endorsement of my degradation, was an internal demolition. It shattered the very foundation of my identity as her mother, as her protector. The room seemed to tilt and spin. The laughter morphed into a deafening, mocking roar that echoed in the hollow cavity of my chest. I stood there, publicly flayed, utterly and completely alone in a sea of well-dressed strangers. Then, cutting through the din like a scalpel, came a voice I knew as well as my own. "My friend Miranda." She didn't shout. She spoke with a calm steel-edged clarity that sliced through the noise and caused the guests nearest to her to fall abruptly silent. "David," she said, stepping forward from the crowd. She was not a tall woman, but in that moment she seemed to tower. Her gaze was level, dispassionate. "I suggest you stop, right now, before you make an even bigger fool of yourself than you already have." The sudden intrusion of a different tone, one of cold authority instead of raucous mockery, created a pocket of strange quiet. David's performative grin froze, then twisted into something uglier, a smirk of contempt now directed at Miranda. He waved the cake server a dismissive, flippant gesture. "Embarrass myself, Miranda, lighten up. It's a wedding. I'm just including my new family in our traditions. A little mess for a lot of luck." He chuckled, trying to recapture the crowd, but the laughter now was thinner, more uncertain. Miranda didn't move. She took another deliberate step forward, placing herself squarely between David and the cake-smeared wreckage that was me. Her eyes, usually warm and scholarly, were chips of flint. "You are operating from a place of profound ignorance, David. You have no conception of the woman you are attempting to ridicule." David barked a laugh, a short, harsh sound. He gestured toward me with the server as if I were an exhibit. "I know exactly who she is. A lonely woman who's spent her life in the shadows of a library, who leeches off her daughter's success because she never had any of her own. A charity case in a cheap dress." His voice was loud, confident, trying to drown out Miranda's quiet certainty with brute volume. It was then that a man moved from the shadows near the back of the tent. He had been standing there observing for some time. Charles Benton was in his early 60s, with a full head of steel-grey hair and the posture of a retired military officer. His suit was impeccably tailored, but subdued the fabric rich without being flashy. He carried an air of quiet, undeniable power. He was not a guest from the Whitlock list. He was my personal guest, my lawyer of 20 years, and a friend from a chapter of my life long before Sophie was born. I had invited him on a whim, a subconscious urge for an ally in enemy territory. Charles did not look at the stunned crowd or at David. He walked with a purposeful, unhurried stride directly to me. He ignored the cake on my face, the ruin of my dress. His expression was one of deep, solemn respect, and a flicker of anger held tightly in check. From his inside breast pocket, he produced a crisp white linen handkerchief, monogrammed with a simple, elegant CB. He offered it to me not as a gesture of pity, but as an act of fealty. Then and only then did he turn to face David. The silence in the tent had become profound, a thick, anticipatory hush. 200 people held their breath. "David Arthur Whitlock." Charles began, his voice resonant and calm, devoid of theatricality. It was the voice of a man reading a legal verdict. "My name is Charles Benton. I am the senior founding partner of the law firm Benton Lowe and Strauss. For the past 2 decades, I have served as the exclusive legal counsel and chief financial advisor for Havenwood Archival Acquisition and Digital Publishing Incorporated." A low murmur ran through a segment of the older crowd. A silver-haired man near the front, a retired state Supreme Court justice, leaned forward, his eyes sharpening. A woman I recognized as the director of the State Historical Society put a hand to her mouth. Charles continued, each word measured and precise, falling into the silence like stones into a still pond. "The individual you have just insulted is Nola Evangeline Rhodes. She is not an employee of the Lowell Public Library. She is the founder, the sole shareholder, and the chief executive officer of Havenwood. Under her direction, and through her singular vision, Havenwood has become the most respected and discreet firm in the nation for the authentication, preservation, and confidential digital publication of historically significant private collections. Our clients include estates you read about in textbooks and families whose names are synonymous with American industry." He paused, letting that sink in. David's face had begun to lose its color. "Last year," Charles stated, his gaze never leaving David's, Havenwood quietly facilitated the $75 million sale of a private aerospace manuscript collection to a major university. The company's current valuation, which remains private at Ms. Rhodes's insistence, is a figure that would conservatively represent a multiple of approximately 20 times the market capitalization of Whitlock Global Industries, your family's publicly traded entity. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. Every single eye in the vast tent was riveted on me. The woman standing with buttercream in her hair and a linen handkerchief in her hand, her back straight, her gaze now clear and steady. David looked as if he had been physically struck. The arrogant set of his shoulders collapsed. His jaw went slack. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor. He was a paper king dissolving in the rain. From beside him came a small shattered whisper. "Mom!" It was Sophie. The word was barely audible, a breath of disbelief and dawning horrifying comprehension. Is any of that true? In the ringing silence, I took my time. I used Charles's handkerchief to wipe the sticky residue from my eyes, my cheeks, my lips. The simple methodical action was a reclaiming of control. I folded the soiled linen neatly, a square of dignity in my palm, and placed it on the edge of the ruined cake table. The icy calm that had settled over me was not numbness. It was a fierce, focused clarity. The pain of the betrayal was now a sharp, clean instrument, not a chaotic storm. I looked past David, who seemed to have turned into a wax figure of himself, and met my daughter's wide, terrified eyes. "It is all true, Sophie," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried firm and undeniable in the hush. "After your father left, the alimony was minimal. The job at the library provided a steady paycheck, and more importantly, health insurance for you. But when you were asleep, that's when I built Havenwood. It started with Mrs. Callahan's attic." I saw a flicker of memory in Sophie's eyes. Mrs. Callahan, our sweet ancient neighbor. She had her father's letters from the Argonne forest. They were crumbling to dust. I spent 6 months every night after my shift carefully restoring and transcribing them. I found a small academic press to publish them. That first check was for $2,000. I reinvested every penny. I taught myself conservation techniques, copyright law, digital archiving. Havenwood grew one client, one precious collection at a time. I never told you because I didn't want that world, the world of valuations and NDAs and clients who whispered to touch you. I wanted your world to be school plays and soccer games and sleepovers. I wanted you to learn the value of a dollar earned from a summer job not inherited. The library, I never left because it grounds me. It reminds me why the work matters. Not for money, but for memory. I finally turned my full attention to David. He flinched as if my gaze were a physical weight. "This dress," I said, looking down at the besmirched blue silk. "I sold my mother's amethyst pendant to buy it. Not because I couldn't afford a gown from the same designer as Eleanor's David, but because I thought something simpler, less obviously expensive, would make you and your family feel less threatened by me. I live in my apartment at Garden Court because every scuff on the floor is from your childhood roller skates, Sophie. Every mark on the doorframe charts your growth. It is not a address of poverty. It is a museum of my heart. You look at me and see everything you have been taught to scorn. I look at you and see a man who mistakes the price tag for the value. I drew a deep breath, feeling a strength I hadn't accessed in years. I addressed the room, my voice growing stronger, filling the space David's mockery had occupied. "There is a final point of order regarding today's festivities. I understand the Whitlock family has been gracious in underwriting the costs of this wedding." I looked directly at Lawrence and Eleanor, who stood together, their expressions a mixture of outrage and dawning pragmatic fear. "Let there be no debt, real or perceived. As of this moment, I am assuming full financial responsibility for this event. Every vendor, every flower, every ounce of champagne, I will have my office issue payments directly. I will not be beholden even in gratitude to individuals who regard basic human kindness as a currency beneath them. David found his voice, then a stammering, wheezing sound. Nola, Ms. Rhodes, please. This is a colossal misunderstanding. It was all in good fun. A prank that went too far. A prank, I repeated softly. The word was absurd, a tiny paper boat in a hurricane. You weren't being playful, David. You were being cruel. You revealed the content of your character today, not mine. I shifted my gaze back to Sophie, my heart a vast aching space. You have now seen the man you agreed to marry without the mask. The choice of what happens next in your life is yours and yours alone. The grand reception tent, once buzzing with celebratory energy, now felt like a courtroom after a damning verdict. The air was thick with stunned silence, and the sour scent of schadenfreude turned to ash. Sophie stood perfectly still at the epicenter, a beautiful statue in white satin caught between the shattered fantasy at her feet and the complicated, powerful truth standing before her. Her eyes glistening with unshed tears traveled over David's face. She was seeing him anew, stripping away the handsome facade, the easy charm, and seeing the petty, cruel core that had been revealed. Her gaze drifted from his panicked, calculating expression to the vulgar wreck of the wedding cake, its perfect tears, now a smashed monument to humiliation. Finally, her eyes settled on me. On my face now clean, but marked by the ordeal. On my stained dress. On the quiet, unwavering certainty in my posture. A single tear broke free and traced a path through her meticulously applied makeup. It was followed by another, and then a quiet, shuddering sob escaped her. A sound of profound grief and disillusionment. It seemed to break a spell. With a movement that was both decisive and heartbreaking, she reached for her left hand. Her fingers closed around the spectacular diamond solitaire David had presented to her on a yacht in the Caribbean. She twisted it once, and the ring slipped off easily as if it had never truly fit. She didn't fling it at him, she didn't hand it back. She simply held it for a suspended moment, the stone catching the twinkling lights of the tent, a final cold sparkle. Then with a soft definitive click, she placed it on the white linen of the cake table beside the wreckage of the top tier. She turned away from him. The rustle of her silk gown was the loudest sound in the world. She took the 3 steps that separated us and walked into my arms, not caring about the smears of frosting on my dress. She buried her face against my shoulder, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I'm sorry," she choked out, her voice muffled. "Mom, I am so sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. See." Then, still holding onto my arm as if for salvation, she turned to face David, her face ravaged, but her voice surprisingly clear, ringing with a newfound steel. "The wedding," she announced, not to him, but to the entire assembled gathering, "is over." What followed was a controlled eruption of chaos. A collective gasp swept the room, followed by a torrent of frantic whispering, the clicking of phones capturing the scandal. Lawrence Whitlock surged forward, his face purple with apoplectic rage. "Now see here, there are contracts, deposits. This is an outrage, a breach of—" He sputtered into incoherence. David simply stood, hollowed out. A man watching his future, his social standing, and his pride evaporate before his eyes. The very society he had sought to impress was now witnessing his spectacular self-inflicted ruin. Within minutes, the Whitlock family became a tight, seething knot of mortification, shepherded by a grim-faced event planner toward a discreet exit away from the accusing stares and the deafening silence that had replaced the celebration. Miranda was instantly at my other side, slipping her arm through mine. Charles Benton gave a small, solemn nod of respect. The 4 of us, a mother, a daughter, a lifelong friend, and a steadfast counsel, formed a small, unshakable island in the receding tide of the wedding party. We didn't wait for a car or a farewell. We simply turned and walked. Together, we left the glittering tent, crossed the dewy manicured lawn, under a sky now dotted with early stars, and found the path that led down to the dark, tranquil shore of Lake Meridian. The music had stopped. The laughter was gone. The only sounds were the crunch of gravel under our feet, the distant call of a loon, and Sophie's soft, steadying breaths as she walked for the first time in a long time firmly by my side. The weeks that followed were a season of unmaking and slow, careful reassembly. Sophie moved her things back into her old room in my apartment. The space that once held her teenage dreams now held boxes of returned crystal and silver, the physical detritus of a broken promise. We talked. Not the surface chatter of recent years, but deep, painful, necessary conversations that lasted into the early hours. She apologized for letting David's values eclipse her own, for every time she had minimized my life to make hers seem larger by comparison, for the slow drift that had felt like abandonment. And I apologized too. I told her I was sorry for the great silence, for the lie of omission I had carried for 2 decades. I thought I was protecting you from pressure, from being treated differently. I explained one rainy afternoon as we sorted through old photos. But in hiding my work, I think I also hid a part of my strength from you. I taught you unintentionally that there was something about my success that needed to be secret. That was my failure. The healing was not a sudden sunrise. It was the gradual lifting of a fog. It was Sophie helping me box up the pale blue dress, not with ceremony, but with the quiet finality of closing a bad chapter. It was me finally taking her to the unassuming brick building in the old warehouse district that housed Havenwood. Her eyes widened as we walked through the secure climate-controlled vaults, past rows of archival boxes containing letters from presidents, diaries of pioneers, the lost sketches of forgotten artists. She met my small dedicated team, the conservators, the cryptographers, the digital historians, people driven by passion, not profit. She saw the soul of the enterprise, and it was nothing like the cold transactional world of the Whitlocks. I offered her a project, not a position. Using her degree in communications, she spearheaded the Community Archive, a pro bono initiative where Havenwood would digitize and preserve the family histories of anyone in our city who wanted to participate. She found her purpose not in planning galas, but in helping an elderly couple scan their fading wedding photos and giving a Vietnam veteran a digital copy of his letters home. She was rebuilding not a life with David, but a sense of self that was authentically hers. As for David, I felt no hatred. The scorching heat of humiliation cooled into something like pity. He was a symptom of a sickness, the belief that net worth equates to human worth. I heard through Miranda, who heard through academic channels that often intersected with old money, that the story had spread. The cake incident had become a cautionary tale in certain circles. His engagement to the secretly ultra-wealthy archivist's daughter, who called off the wedding after he publicly mocked her mother, had cost him more than a marriage. It had cost him credibility and made him a laughingstock of a different, more devastating kind. My own peace was cemented on an ordinary Tuesday. I put on my comfortable loafers and my soft, worn cardigan. I drove not to the Havenwood offices, but to the Lowell Public Library. Mrs. Gable from the Senior Center was waiting, cradling a shoebox tied with string. "These are my father's letters from the Panama Canal." "Nola," she said, her voice hesitant. "They're probably nothing important." I smiled a real easy smile that started deep inside. "Mrs. Gable, there is no such thing as an unimportant story. Let's have a look together." As I carefully untied the string and lifted the lid, handling the brittle paper with the gentle expertise born of decades, I felt a profound and complete sense of home. I was Nola Evangeline Rhodes, archive manager, mother, founder and CEO. A woman who had been publicly broken and who had chosen piece by piece to put herself back together, not into who she was before, but into who she truly was all along. The lesson the universe carved into my soul that day is this. We sometimes dim our own light, believing it is humility, only to discover that those who dwell in darkness will never perceive its glow, regardless of its brilliance. True humility is not about pretending to be less. It is the quiet confidence of knowing you have nothing to prove. Your value is not inscribed on the labels you wear or the addresses you quote, but in the quiet knowledge you carry within and in the hearts of those who cherish you for the authentic, unvarnished person you are. I still work at the public library on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But now when I push through those heavy oak doors, I carry my whole story with me. I have no more secrets to keep, no more masks to wear. And that perhaps is the greatest freedom of all. What about your story? Have you ever felt the pressure to conceal a part of your journey, your success or your true self, to make others feel more comfortable? Have you ever been underestimated only to find strength in that very moment? I would be honored to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this narrative touched a place in your heart, if it reminded you of your own resilience, please show your support by giving this video a like. Consider subscribing to this channel. We have many more stories to share about dignity discovery and the quiet power of truth. And if you believe someone in your life needs to hear this message about self-worth, about integrity, about the courage to stand up, please share this video with them. Thank you for spending this time with me, for listening to a story of cake cruelty and ultimate clarity. Remember, my friends, your most authentic self is your greatest strength. Walk in that truth.